Yeah, kicking on. Welcome, everybody. We're finding out that our microphone is without batteries or dead batteries, so I will just speak loudly. We will kick off with the Pledge of Allegiance, and you will notice we now have a flag, but for the benefit of the Zoomers, I'm going to go ahead and hold up the flag. And Steve, what do I need to do? Continue there? Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. You may be seated. We do have several guests, and I'm going to call on our members to introduce. David, you have a guest. And Joan has a guest. Woo. Thank you for coming, Bill. And Grace, you have a guest. Woo. I'm going to do a quick scan, but I think that's everybody. Just remember, please remind you, Cup Money, we're still building that fund back up. We went without that for almost a year because of COVID. A reminder, I've mentioned it a couple of times, starting July, the July through September quarter, we will be meeting in person and a hybrid meeting in person and also via Zoom on the first and third Thursdays of the months, July, August, and September. The second and fourth Thursdays will be Zoom only. The fifth Thursday in July will be a social, and most likely the fifth Thursday in September will also be a social. That one's not really planned just yet. Another mark your calendar on June 24, that's a week from today. The Rotary Cubed will be having a virtual presentation. It starts at 6 o'clock Central Time. I did attach the flyer to my email, and the significance of this is there's a link. You hit the link, you reserve your spot. There is no cost, but it does require reservation so that they can then, I think, follow up and send a link to you at a later date. If you've had any kind of leadership training, please report it. It doesn't have to be specifically Kansas Leadership Center, but we had a goal of 5. I think we have 5. It wouldn't hurt to have a few more report in. So please do that. We are also very close on a membership goal. And thank you, Carla, you put us very close. But there are a couple others that may be joining, but if you have anybody else you know of, please reach out to them. We could use 1 or 2 members just to ensure that we hit that goal. Want to thank the Rotary Rubbish Roundup crew. We met again last Saturday, and the Seward boat ramp is much cleaner than it was. And we actually pulled out more trash than I thought we would. So anyway, I think that's it for announcements. I'm going to call on Terry Hobbs, who is the president of the Board of Trustees for the Friends of the Free State Capitol. And she will introduce our speakers today.
Thank you. Thank you. I have the opportunity to thank all of you for all of your support of Constitution Hall. A lot of it began with you when you gave so generously for Rotary Park. And we have two other people here that have donated much of their time. And Chris Meinhardt and Grant will talk to you about what's going on right now with this building. It looks like a phoenix rising out of the ashes. If any of you have not seen it, you must. It's pretty incredible. I would like to introduce some of the trustees on the trustee board from Rotary right now. David. We have David Beck. Richard. Hey, Richard. Yeah, turn around. Richard's been a great help. He's a newer board member. We have, of course, Chris and Grant. And Stan, I'm sorry. And we have Stan, who is great. All right. Chris and Grant, Chris Meinhardt has been tenacious with his project. Tenacious, and he has given part of his life to it, 22 years. And Chris, he founded the Freedom, not Frontier. He founded the foundation that takes care of renovating the building. Chris is an architect by trade. And then we have Grant. You came in about 04. Is that right, Grant? Could be. And there was a great need for lawyer skills, and he certainly gave it. So let me introduce Grant and Chris, and they will talk about what's happening today.
Hello, everybody. It's going to be 100 degrees today. That reminds us of Constitution Hall like nothing else does, right? We go down there on a good July day and have a Freedom Festival, and it's at least 100. I don't know if anybody heard the news that President Biden recently spoke with a senior center and he spoke to this vaccinated center and congratulated them on all the hard work they had done to save as many lives and to prepare themselves going forward. After the speech, he mingled a little bit among the group and noticed one woman that he wasn't quite tracking, and he walked up to her and he said, "Madam, do you know who I am?" And she said, she thought a moment and she looked at him and she said, "Well, no, but there's a nice lady at the front desk that'll help you." Constitution Hall is Topeka's oldest and most historically significant building. It's arguably Kansas's most important pre-Civil War historic site. William Seal has called it the principal historic site of the American West. That is high praise from the architectural historian William Seal, who was the historian for the state capitol renovation in Kansas, as well as several other states before he died. He was a great proponent of this project and had many important things to say about the project. Well, the story of Constitution Hall, and I'm going to have to figure out how to do this. Oh, there we are. Starts with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and that was popular sovereignty, where we changed the rules of how we were going to admit states and decided to let the locals have a decision in the process of whether they would be a free or slave state. And so this is a map of what it looked like when that decision was made. And you can see the black states were largely in the South, and there's Missouri kind of sticking up there among some free states on two sides, and a desire not to have a third on its western border. Unfortunately, these decisions made for hard times. And in the spring of 1855, there was the vote, the first vote on sovereignty. And the Missourians, and I have a lot of Missouri blood as well, so I'm not speaking about just them, but the Missourians had a plan to make sure that the vote was in their favor. So if you want to talk about election fraud, let's talk about election fraud. Because they sent, there were 6,000 votes cast in that election. In Kansas at that time, there were only 2,900 registered voters. And the locals were intimidated with Bowie knives and other folks. Here are a couple of border ruffians with their swords to make sure that the locals did not vote. Well, one thing about voter suppression is that it does require an equal and opposite reaction. And that reaction was the popular, Free Kansas, Free State movement. I was trying to think of Free Soil, Free State movement. And that started in a cluster of these small free state towns in eastern Kansas, and then culminated in the desire to write a free state constitution, because what had happened in the election was the election of the bogus legislature. And it was investigated by Congress and found to be bogus. But nevertheless, it had the endorsement of President Pierce at the top. And so, boo, 3 boos for Mr. Pierce. Boo, boo, boo. At any rate, we had that election. The bogus legislature ultimately met in Lecompton. And at the same time, we were trying to have a separate government for the Free Staters. And so they organized a constitutional convention. And they looked at Topeka because it was further away from Missouri than Lawrence. And they talked to the founders, Mr. Farnsworth and others, about using Constitution Hall to hold their convention. And they made a deal that they would help pay for the conclusion. This was our Cyrus Holiday being one of the principal Free Staters and persons that made the Constitution happen in Topeka. And they negotiated to have a convention in October. And the representatives came and they wrote what is called the Topeka Constitution. And that after that was passed in October, it was taken before the electorate and overwhelmingly passed. So the plan was to take that Constitution to Congress, have Congress approve it, and make Kansas a free state. Well, it got passed along. It passed the House of Representatives, I think the following July. But in the meantime, things started heating up in Kansas, and Bleeding Kansas continued to bleed even more. And there was an election held, and Charles Robinson was elected the first governor of the Free State. He was later elected the first real government by the real government, but real governor by the real government. But at this point, he was the Free State governor, and he was soon to be arrested for sedition because of that title. At the same time, there was the sack of Lawrence in the spring of 1855. We know about Quantrill's raid, but sometimes we forget about that Lawrence had been sacked prior to that in 1856, where the hotel was burned and the printing presses were thrown into the river. So a lot was going on. There was John Brown had the Potawatomi raid. There were just lots of blood flowing. So on that cusp of that, the Free Staters were going to have their legislature meet at Constitution Hall in Topeka on 4th of July of 1856. And that was not a good idea, according to our President Pierce. Boo! Okay. And so he authorized, and his secretary, Jefferson Davis, Secretary of War Jefferson Davis, advised Colonel Sumner, who commanded troops in Leavenworth, Bull Sumner, to come to Topeka and make sure that our legislature did not meet on that 4th of July. He brought soldiers from Fort Riley and from Fort Leavenworth, and about 400 of them, and he brought cannon. And he aimed those cannon directly at Constitution Hall. Well, 4th of July was a big deal then, and there were over 500 locals that turned out for this day of celebration. Many of them were in the Kansas militia. And certainly blood could have flowed that day, but there's discretion prevailed on that time. And Sumner went to both bodies, the Senate meeting upstairs and the House of Representatives downstairs, and he asked them to disperse. He mentioned it was the hardest thing he ever had to do as a soldier was to ask these people to disperse. And in this event, in which citizens of the United States who are normally guaranteed their right to gather and assemble, normally guaranteed the right to free speech, were denied both by the US military. And that was looked upon by the press. There were members from not Kansas City, but from Chicago and New York that were present and wrote about it at length. There's lots of journals. Again, I'd like to quote from our historian, Mr. Seal. Meanwhile, the governor appointed by President Pierce forbade the meeting of the Topeka legislature and asked Colonel Sumner, stationed at Fort Leavenworth, to prevent the assembly and break it up if necessary. It was the hardest job he'd done, but no shots were fired. At the end of that, the crowd gave, because of the respectful manner that it was handled by Bull Sumner, the crowd gave 3 cheers for Colonel Sumner. Yay, hip, hip, hooray, hip, hip, hooray, come on, hip, hip, hooray, hip, hip, hooray. And 3 jeers at that time for President Pierce. Hip, hip, boo, hip, hip, boo, hip, hip, boo. All right, we get you out of your chairs maybe. Well, there were dark days that followed. In fact, there were embargoed supplies from the Free State towns. They could not get supplies, and they had to start raiding parties. And the loot that they collected often ended up in the basement of Constitution Hall just to feed the locals in Topeka. There were other uses done. Topeka's Constitution Hall is the principal historic site of the anti-slavery struggle for Kansas. In this building, Kansas really began its long journey to statehood. Subsequent episodes of the hall's history are fascinating and sometimes melodramatic. It was a storage place for the legendary Beecher Bibles, in reality rifles for the aid of the Free Staters. It was the quartermaster's depot for the Lane Trail, the only free trade route which was traveled in escaping slavery. And it was part of the temporary capitol on Kansas Avenue before the east wing of the current capitol was built in 1869. While Lecompton's Constitution Hall delivered the pro-slavery Constitution, it is owned and restored by the state of Kansas. The Topeka's Constitution Hall, so important to the Free State birth of Kansas, has yet to be similarly honored. Constitution Hall is an iconic symbol of the Free State movement and that made Kansas a free state and may well be in the tipping point which caused the southern states to rebel, knowing they could no longer have a stranglehold on slavehood going forward. No wonder Constitution Hall is one of the few sites in our city that is on the National Register for its national importance. There's a lot of work going on at Constitution Hall right now, and I know you really want to hear about that. So Chris, would you come on up? And boy, I'll just flip right through all these various slides that I didn't get to. There's Colonel Sumner riding in front of Constitution Hall. There you go.
Thanks, Grant. I'll just quickly tell you a little bit about what's been going on for the last 4 to 5 years in construction of the facade. I might ask you to look at the slides as we look at some of this progress. This is the opening of the groundbreaking of the facade project, and many of you were there that day. One of the biggest early parts of the project was getting the temporary structural shoring in to make sure the building didn't come down while the, something's happened here. I might need some help. Well, in any case, one of the biggest pieces of, one of the biggest problems was getting temporary shoring into the building. There we go. Thank you so much. On the left, we have steel beams coming in through the upper floor door, and on the right, the late 20th century facade has has come down. These slides show some of the major equipment that was on site for the demolition and for the pouring of excavation for pouring of concrete. We have the very substantial foundation that's about a 5 foot. It's hard for me to see, but that's about a 5 foot excavation of the sidewalk and the foundation to pour a new foundation to support the steel beams that will carry that could carry the load of the new stone and framing. Here's the steel work complete and the framing in progress with sheathing underway. And recently, just last week, the new floor on the first floor was completed. We've had to install new floor joists and new subflooring so that the building can be used more frequently than it has been in the past. I might mention before this, we have put on several new roofs. We've taken down a small addition to the building in the back. What else have we done? Just lots of work, especially with the Historical Society, to make sure everything's done according to Hoyle. For this process, we used a construction management approach, which is a bit different than the traditional design bid build approach. And that gave us a lot more flexibility in working with the Historical Society and contractors. So thank you very much. Grant's going to come back and talk about what's going to happen next in the Rotary Park.
We'll be available for questions here. Yeah, as you recall, you were asked to help contribute to the construction of Rotary Park, adjacent to Constitution Hall, when we celebrated our 100th anniversary. And that was in 1914 or 2014, right? It was all kind of a blur to me, but so many of you stepped up to make contributions to what is a beautiful small park that really tells both the story of Constitution Hall and the Brown v. Board decision and the Supreme Court case that was about that. But across the street, of course, from Constitution Hall is the old post office. I went in this week to get a replacement key for my mailbox, and the woman in there working the counter said, "I know who you are." And I didn't think about that until I remembered I'd been quoted a couple of times about railing about the poor condition of the post office recently. But she actually gave me the key. I'm not sure she was supposed to, so maybe it was a good thing she knew who I was. If they'd only remembered to deliver my mail to the box, I'd be much happier. But anyway, you helped give us the good housekeeping seal of approval. To say we struggled through the years would be a mild understatement. We had received funding from the city of Topeka through what we would call the bed tax, and that helped a lot in the shoring up of the building, the repointing of walls, tearing down of the later addition that was on the back side of the building. All those things had to be done to get to the point where we are now. But there just was not enough time in the day to do everything that ought to have been done. But we kept the leaks to a minimum. And they might have needed a lawyer, but they needed a carpenter a lot more. And it seemed like I was building benches, and Chris and I were building bathrooms and things that we maybe didn't know what we were doing. But we did a lot of that. And then we got some nice friends that got to know about Constitution Hall through that Rotary project. And we invited them to be on the board, and they bolstered our confidence. And in recent months, we have been just buoyed to the point of just unbelievable. It's unbelievable to us, Chris and I in particular, because we've received some very substantial donations that are going to help us get along and perhaps finish this project. Those are words that I thought I would never be able to say during my lifetime. We'll see if it happens. And it's, it has been a labor of love for Chris. I mean, day and night, probably at much personal sacrifice. And it has been a complete pleasure to be by his side and be supportive of that effort. And there is this hope that we will be able to start a capital campaign in the next 6 to 12 months to conclude this. We do have some possible renderings of what it might look like on the inside. And it's really, the plans here are really too small to study, but the plan on the left is possible restaurant on the main floor. Perhaps some other kind of commercial use, but the idea would be to get people on the premises one way and pick up on history by osmosis, if nothing else. Have an opportunity to have displays, the backs of menus, other ways to celebrate this fine building. But this building was built as a retail building and community meeting hall on the second floor. And so on the right is a layout for a possible multidiscipline room on the second floor for classroom space for students, as well as social functions, dinners, banquets. There's a catering kitchen, and there's bathrooms. And right now we're in the process of designing the elevator that will go. And so in the building, you'll recall there was a building on the left and a building on the right. So the north building, there will be a reception area, that a small reception area, an elevator, and bathrooms that will, so the people that are going to the second floor have a entry. And that can be curtained off so that if there's a separate retail space on the main floor, the hours can be different for those two spots. These plans are far from final, but at least the architects are beginning to give shape to this so that we have something that we can share with the community as we go forward. But again, we are indebted to Rotary and the Rotarians, many of whom are in this room, for helping us have the foresight to see the end of this and encouragement. Jim Ogle, before he was with the current organization that I happen to chair, Freedom's Frontier, it was a great voice, and just talking to a few of you gave us inspiration to think that we could really do something great. And I think we will, and it's something that we can all be very proud of. And we do hope to have a reception there in October when the weather's a little cooler, and for Rotarians, and unveil the new plaque with I think we haven't added a president to that plaque since 2018. So there are a few people that deserve recognition. So we have something that I think we'll be looking forward to, and we'll get a date figured out and have you there at that time. At this point, Chris, come up and let's answer any questions. Terry, you have something you want to say?
I forget about you people. I'm glad you're here. The history, this all started in 1997. The historian by the name of Dr. Seal was, he loves renovating, he was renovating the Kansas Capitol. He's an archivist, authenticator of history, and he was tremendous. Chris went to him and asked him to come and look at this building. I mean, the west wall was gone almost, in a rubble. And so Howard Paul owned those two buildings, and you know what it's like with a developer. When he needs the money, he wants the money. There were bulldozers in the backyard at Constitution Hall. And so Chris, with Dr. Seal and other people, representatives at the state and senators, they went and got a one-time application of money or whatever they call, and they gave 70,000, the 70,000 of money to buy this building, not to renovate it, just buy the building, and then 30,000 of people had to match that grant. So see, Chris, this has been a labor of love here, and we're just so glad to see it at this process right now. So thank you for your support.
I must mention there have been many people, in addition to me and Grant, who contributed heavily to this. And I see several in this room. There was great question of, and reasonable question, very good question of whether or not the project should proceed because of the condition of the building at the time. Grant mentioned that the Lecompton Constitution Hall, as iconic as this, that was something that the people involved with this project recognized. They were able to tell their story because they had a place to do so. And it was a very important story, as is this side of the story. So that's why we continued, despite what Terry described. The building was in very poor condition, and there were just a lot of reasons to second guess. There were a lot of second guesses. I saw a question. We don't.
Repeat the question, please.
Yes, the question is whether or not the building to the north is stable and solid. We don't really know. I can't answer that. We don't own the building. We have a right of way through that building that we don't use because we have our own stairway now and on the exterior. But that's something we'll have to look at over time. We know our building is stable. It's got a lot of steel in there. One of our recent donors said there'll be a F10 tornado and it will still be there. So. Well, the north wall of that, yes, sort of. The north wall of that building is the south wall of that building is the north wall of Constitution Hall. Yes, they're shared. And next to the stairway, there's a wall that's shared, that is a structure wall for both buildings. And it's in good shape. Yes, Karen.
Retail space that you just described on the first floor, the science space, was territorial capital, if you will, on the second floor, but you also mentioned to me perhaps underground railroad exhibits and so on in the basement. Has that changed?
No, I should have mentioned it, but we're right now not doing any work to the basement, so there was no rendering, so I didn't think of it. But many of you have toured the lower level, and I think it's one of the favorite parts of the tour is to imagine those warehouse stores of scavenged goods, the Underground Railroad. The freight forwarder was a person who advertised as forwarding freight, but was in fact the person who anchored the Underground Railroad in Topeka, and his office was in that basement. So there's a lot of history there. It's a dirt floor, and we have a low light, more of a cave kind of lighting down there. You could grow cheese down there. And I don't think we're ever going to do much more to it other than make sure it's safe. You have to don a hard hat or bend because the ceilings are quite low. That's one of the things that is interesting, is that after the building was built, they came along and lowered Kansas Avenue. They just scraped it 6 to 10 inches lower. And so what they did to accommodate that was lower the floors in the building at the expense of the basement. And now what we have done now with these new floors is really build a new structure over what was there. So the floors are going to be back to their original height, but the basement is still short. So there are some limitations, and mostly it's just going to be the south side. The north side will probably, it's even shorter, and it will probably be used just for storage or whatever. Other questions? Yeah, Jim. I think that's pretty close. Yeah, the question is, where did the stone come from that was used to build Constitution Hall? Chris?
I can just report that there is a statement by the owner of the property, the developer of the property, Loring Farnsworth, who we all know, many of us know, was the first mayor of the city, who said that's where they got the stone. That statement was collected by a lady named Abzuga Adams, who was the first librarian of our State Historical Society. She interviewed him. He had moved to Fort Scott, Kansas, and he came to Topeka, and she interviewed him, collected his recollection of the construction. So that's firsthand eyewitness news. Oh, yeah, the facade stone was supplied, is that the new stone? The new stone was supplied by Lardner, JT Lardner's cut stone here in Topeka. And that is from the Cottonwood Falls Mill. The stone that was once mined or excavated for that building was not durable enough. And so we work with the Historical Society to use that particular stone, which very closely matches what's there now. Oh, wow. Wow. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chris, Grant, and Terry. And believe me, Chris has put in countless hours to make this real, and Grant got in pretty early too, and he spent a lot of time on this project. And it's very exciting to see because we have some momentum now, and things are looking much better. Next, well, first of all, as you know, Grant and Chris know, we donate this book to Ross Elementary School. We're going to ask them to sign the book plate. I found this was interesting. This was written by Dan Brown, who wrote Da Vinci Code. So I didn't know he wrote children's books, but I saw that and I said, can it be the same? Yeah, it is. Next week, we will have Jay Ives from Blind Tiger, and he's going to talk, the topic is brewing in Kansas, and I understand we will have some samples. So that'll be next week. And I think that's it for announcements, or do we have what, Lee? Oh. There you go. Fresh from the garden. So take advantage of that. Lee is quite the gardener, and it's a big garden. Let's stand for the four-way test. Oh, what, pardon? Okay. Of the things we think they do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And will it be fun and kind?